We support you, Joseph. Please keep reporting Ukraine's story. We need more truth tellers. I'll say amen to that. We take you to Ukraine now for another live report from Joseph Lindsley. Joseph, I heard that there was a missile strike last night. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense said late Monday night that a strike destroyed Russian cruise missiles while they were being transported by train to a town in Crimea. Now, Crimea is occupied by the Russians, so what are they doing loading up with ammunition in that area?
Yeah, Bob, good afternoon from Lviv. Crimea, the Russians have occupied Crimea since 2014. In the wake of Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity, the people took, sort of sent the pro-Putin regime fleeing to Russia, and the country was really governed by the people, and there was a bit of chaos at the time. Russia had already had a naval base since the 1990s in Sevastopol, in the capital of Crimea. Crimea had a semi-autonomous status as a Ukrainian, not even as an oblast, but as a republic within Ukraine. But the Russians already had their naval and military presence in Crimea, so it was very easy for them in 2014 to sweep in and take the Crimean Peninsula. And from Crimea, throughout this big invasion since February 24th, a year ago, the Russians have launched many of their attacks, both from the Black Sea Fleet, which is positioned off of Crimea, and from Crimea itself. And yes, last night there was, and I saw some videos of people, because in Crimea there have been, very few attacks and incidents. Anyone that lives in territory controlled by Russia that has not been Ukrainian Ukrainian controlled since 2014 has lived in peace, this whole past year. But there was this mysterious attack near a Russian air base, and it does seem that there have been a few Ukrainian incursions. Very stealth attacks with drones, going back also to October 8th of last year. There was the attack on that bridge that Russia built after 2014, connecting Russia with Crimea. And we even with all these things, we still don't know for sure exactly who was behind it. If it is the Ukrainians, they do have to have an element of secrecy. Also, because many Western officials, especially people at the Pentagon, going back to last summer, have warned Ukraine about attacking Crimea and trying to get Crimea back. And this puts everyone's kind of in the big dilemma, because for most Ukrainians, this doesn't end until Crimea is back in Ukrainian hands, until the native people of Crimea, the Muslim Tatars, who want to be free, many of them are in exile now throughout Ukraine, until they can have their homeland back. And it's also interesting geopolitically that attack happened last night, because Xi Jinping, the dictator and the president of China, is currently in Moscow. And when Russia took the Crimean Peninsula in 2014, China refused to condemn that action. And so China's been sort of a quiet supporter of this. And it's also interesting, while the Chinese dictator, is in Moscow, the Japanese Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, is in Kyiv. And I think that this is all sort of, intentional and showing support of free nations versus totalitarian nations. Japan faces, there's a couple of islands where on Japanese territory that Russia claims jurisdiction over, and Japan also, of course, faces threats from China. So we see this moving behind the scenes. And I think as we look at whatever the Chinese propose, everyone has to consider the cost of Chinese support. And there's lots of evidence to see. I mean, for at least 10 years, China has had this, it's called the New Silk Road Initiative, or the Belt and Road Initiative. And it seems like a nation building project where they help countries with infrastructure. For example, the little European country of Montenegro signed a deal with China, $1 billion loan to build a bridge. Well, that bridge many years later is unbuilt. It doesn't go anywhere. And because little Montenegro is so much in debt to China, the European Union refuses to accept membership. And so I think everyone has to look at, what is the cost of accepting sort of temporary money from China? And then there's the deeper question of freedom and liberty. The people of Hong Kong, there was a British colony, and in the 1997 handover treaty with the UK, Beijing promised that Hong Kong would have freedom of speech, all the liberties they enjoyed as a British colony until at least 2048. But in 2020, China took those freedoms away. And in the past few years, up before that moment, the people of Hong Kong, could tell that Beijing was trying to restrict their liberty. And so they took to the streets, especially in 2019 and early 2020, and they were waving the American flag, British flags, the Hong Kong flag, and really interestingly, the Ukrainian flag, because the people of Hong Kong had looked to Ukraine's 2014 revolution as a blueprint on how they could oust oust the tyrannical regime. And China has always been uncomfortable with Ukraine's 2014 revolution. And so as we look at any proposal that Beijing would make, we have to keep in mind that, China, in fact, the Chinese ambassador in Kyiv in 2019 published a statement condemning the Hong Kong the statement was in Ukrainian. And he said, we condemn the protest on the Maidan. And Maidan is such a sacred word for Ukrainians. It means the public square where you have your protest. And you see that then the Communist Party of China, their deep animosity toward the freedom project anywhere, including Ukraine, including Hong Kong, including Taiwan. And so that's why we see today, and some speculate, and as I've been talking with experts about this, that President Xi's visit to Russia might demonstrate that Russia is in a weak spot, and they really need China. And so we'll see what kind of deals are made as a result of these discussions.
Interesting, because it seems like Putin is putting on quite a show for the rest of the world. What are people there saying about these meetings that are continuing today, Joseph?
I think more. It's usually voices in the West with whom I speak about meetings like this. In Ukraine, it is still more of a day-to-day matter of surviving and making sure that the soldiers are fortified to fight. And again, you feel the war very deeply. I mean, last night I went into a restaurant for dinner, and the chef was off duty, and one of his best friends, who I also knew, had been killed, and it was just despondent. And crying on my shoulder and everyone else's shoulder, that you encounter every single day here. And so while there are these high-level maneuverings, the reality of war hits hard, and everyone, is bucking each other up here on the ground in Ukraine.
I'll end with a text from one of our listeners. We support you, Joseph. Please keep reporting Ukraine's story. We need more truth tellers. I'll say amen to that. Well,
thanks. And one interesting note, the Wagner group of the Russian military, they were involved in an attack in Africa that killed 9 Chinese. So there's right now in these days, this week, I know also in America, there's a lot of maneuverings behind the scenes. So we'll keep sharing as much truth as we can here from Ukraine.
We appreciate it. It's such a complicated story that affects so much more of the world than just where you are there in Lviv. Thank you, Joseph. Be well.
Thank you, Bob. Until tomorrow.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important, that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?